need you to raise your glass. I don't care what you put in it. Here's the nights that you can't take back. We live hard, but we love to laugh. We all thought that we'd get rich fast. Hopped the plane out for greener grass. Found out the green is cash. Don't compare to the friends that last. See, we won't forget where we came from. This city won't change us. We beat to the same drum. No, we won't forget where we came from. This city can't change us. We beat to the same drum, the same drum. No matter where we go, we always find a way back home. No matter where we go, we always find a way back home. So here's to the cheap sunglasses, Red Bull and minivans, and people who had your back when the world didn't understand. See, we won't forget where we came from. The city won't change us. We beat to the same drum. No, we... All right, everybody. Good morning. We are recording this morning. My name is Kefi Andersen, and I'm with OSPI. Today, we're going to talk about early warning systems in a virtual world. I have with me Sunnyside High School representatives and Chief Kamiakin Elementary School. Specifically, we've got Dave Martinez, who is the Director of Student Life and Athletics at Sunnyside High School, and Kimberly Frank. She is the principal at Chief Kamiakin Elementary School. These guys are rock stars. They're doing some really cool work, and I think that you're going to learn a lot from them today. We are planning to sort you into breakout rooms. So if you can change your name, the way that you do this is you can click on either your picture or the participants button in your menu. I guess it's a menu. And then you say rename or more next to your name, and then you can tell us your role in your school. And we're doing this partially because we want to put you with people that are in similar positions so that you can share your experience together and hopefully learn from each other. We do have a poll to start off with. We're interested in who's here, so we'd love to know your role, your grade band, and how familiar you are with the topic. So I'm just going to launch that poll. And while that's going, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you. So looking at these images, which image best represents how you're feeling right now? And you can tell us in the chat in what way. So I know for myself, I'm looking at those shovels pretty hard and thinking about how it's hard to dig out, and I'm not facing the horizon at the moment. So I don't know where y'all are at. There's a lot of options out there. So please tell us in the chat how you're feeling. And we'll get the poll results out also. And it looks like we've just had a bunch of people join. So I'm going to leave that poll up for them so that they can do that as well. And I want to check in with the chat. Dave, are you seeing anything in the chat? What are people saying out there? And Dave, are you able to see that? I see some shovels. I use the dirt from one hole to fill in another hole. I see rooster. Tell us more, Allison. A chicken with a shovel. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, and it looks like We've got about 80% have answered the poll, so I'm just going to share that back with our presenter so you can see. And we've got a lot of counselors in the office and some administrators. We've got some district office staff as well, a lot of secondary folks, and people are somewhat familiar with the topic. So that's pretty awesome. We got a good audience out there today. Thank you for spending time with us. We're glad you're here. So today, what we're going to talk about is Dave and Kimberly have both been working a lot with Gonzaga's Chuck Salina and Suzanne Gertz, and they've been building their work on the conceptual framework. And they're going to tell you more about what that is, but it's kind of the roadmap to everything that they do in their school. They're also going to be talking about connection between social emotional learning and connect, build, and envision. And finally, we're going to be getting to that adapting early warning systems for a virtual world. So those are the big topics for this session. And we have another polling question for you as well. Where do you want to spend the most time today? And we're doing this so that we can make sure that we're focusing on what you need. So you can tell us, do you want to spend the most time in adapting early warning systems, CBE, Q&A, or planning time with others? So I'm going to send that poll out right now so you can answer that. And then in the chat, what questions do you have for us? What are you most concerned with right now? So what brought you to this session? And we're going to circle back to these questions as we go. And also at the very end of the session, once we've had some time to parse through. So if you have questions for our presenters, I know Sunnyside and Chief Kamiakin, you guys are both doing really cool stuff. And so if you have specific questions about early warning systems, we want to make sure that we're answering those. And it looks like we've got about 74% have voted. They want to spend a lot of time in adapting early warning systems and CBE. They don't want as much planning time and they don't need Q&A, okay? So those results are there for y'all. And then let's go to the next part. So Dave, do you want to tell them about how you got roped into all of this awesomeness?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to be here today. Give you a little bit of background before we get into the conceptual framework and the principles behind CBE. That there's research behind all the things that we did and we're doing. And the Gonzaga story is pretty unique. 2010-11, we were a SIG school. We were brought on, applied for that grant because of our low graduation rate. We were sub 50%. We partnered with Gonzaga University and we utilized Dr. Chuck Salina, who was a professor at the time at Gonzaga. He became our turnaround principal, came in and helped us to utilize the people that we had in our building to create systems and to grow where we are today. And if I were to look at some of the things we're doing now, back in 10-11, I would have been banging my head against the wall thinking, how are we ever going to do this? So hopefully one of the things that comes out of today is you can see that anybody can do this when you've got the vision to go the right direction. And so that's one of the big things I hope you can get out of today's. The next part I want to talk about is that OSPI did a study, and they took 10 outlier schools that were showing, despite socioeconomic status, that they were still being successful. And they took 5 large schools and 5 small schools, and they looked at the themes. And the schools had a similar themes that the work that they were doing to make an impact on their schools. And then the last part there's currently an ESD 123 Leadership Consortium that's a partner between Dr. Gertz and Dr. Salina and OSPI. And they're working with ESD 123 currently on the conceptual framework, CBE principles, data dashboards. So very powerful work that they're doing there, and they're seeing some positive results for that. The next slide is, normally you'd see this at the end, but I just want to, again, let you see, there's a lot of the work. Powerless to Powerful is a book, and it talks about kind of the beginning of the work at Sunnyside, and it's an easy read to dig into, and you can see some of the beginning work that happened at Sunnyside and where we moved to. And then transforming schools through systems change. Again, they're both very easy reads, and they're give you kind of a big picture. We have schools that come in and check things out at the school, how things look when you get here. And I always recommend that at least read Powerless to Powerful before you come, and it gives you kind of a common language to think about before you come in and see the things that are happening in the building. Obviously not at this time with our virtual world, but there's some cool things still happening here, even though we are virtual. And then there's some contact information over there on the right-hand side with Dr. Selena, Susan Gertz, Dixie, and Kefi. So we'll get into the next slide, and I'm going to start to talk about the conceptual framework and what that is. So go ahead. And as I do this, I want you to think to yourself about an adult that played a significant impact on your life. So think of that adult, and our framework, this is the thing that we talk about. This is what helped us really make the changes in our building. And it's something we hang our hat on, hang our coat on. It's our true north. And it's based on 3 parts. And the first piece is academic press. And when we talk about academic press, what that is it's having a high standard, but also having a belief that people can meet that standard. Just having the high standard itself isn't what academic press is. It's both the high standard and a belief that we can get there together. And then the social supports, all those things that we put in place to help people meet that standard. And then we hold it all together. And this is the piece that is essential. And that's that the person giving it makes the person feel comfortable and feeling safe, makes them feel safe, but not always comfortable, because you're being held accountable. And sometimes that doesn't feel comfortable, but you know that you can mess up and still move forward. And that the person giving it has something to offer and providing time and expertise. So that's our framework. If you go to the next slide, I wanted you to, again, I think you can jot this down real quick. I really want you to think about that adult that's made an impact in your life. And I would guess that the conceptual framework was alive when they were doing that. I want you to think about the actions they took to show that they had a high standard for you and a belief that you could meet it. When you think about those supports that they would have put in place to help you meet that standard. And then the last part there, I want you to think about the ways that they made you feel safe, maybe not comfortable, but you knew you could mess up, but you knew you would be able to pick yourself back up and keep going. How did you know they were putting in time and energy? And then how did you know they had something to offer you? And this is something I've started doing with people when I'm describing the conceptual framework, because sometimes people want to just go over this piece and get past it. It's a crucial piece that is what allows us to do all the work. It's our filter when we're putting in a system in place for our building. We use the conceptual framework as a filter. So I hope that made sense as I have you kind of play with this idea yourself. And as you're thinking about implementing it into your building, when you have an idea of what it would feel like for yourself, it's easier to put it in play. So this is the framework that's put our work and it's helped us make the huge strides that we've made. We started off sub 50. We've been 90% or better over the last 5 years. And not only just the graduation piece, which is important, but it's the post-secondary. It's a belief our kids have and our staff have right now. Their efficacy is really high. When Gonzaga first came to our building in 10, 11 with Dr. Selena, kids were like, why would Gonzaga want to come to Sunnyside? And now Gonzaga would come here. They'd be like, of course you're coming to Sunnyside. Why wouldn't you not be in Sunnyside? So that efficacy with our staff and students has just grown so much. And you can definitely point to the conceptual framework as a big piece to help that belief change. So again, this is a piece for the work that's happened to sustain the work over the last 10, 11 years. The next piece I'm going to talk about is the culture piece of our building. And this makes me really proud because when people come visit our school, the one thing they say is, they'll say, Dave, I can feel the culture in your building, like from your staff and your students, I can feel it. And that's one of the high compliments for me when I hear that. And it's built on 3 principles, and it's connect, build, and envision. You can go to, there we go. And when we talk about these 3 principles, we're talking about the adults and students, how they see the role that they're doing, how do they fit into the well-being of our school. There's a piece of self-worth that's created with connecting to our school. We want kids and staff to say, our school does this. Usually when somebody says our school does this, there's usually a positive thing associated with it. When you hear someone say that, can you believe what that school's doing? It's usually a negative thing. And so we're always trying to do things to make sure that people are connected, that self-worth, and my school does this. The relationship piece, that's a key. I can't imagine any high school that doesn't, or elementary, middle school, doesn't see the relationship piece as a powerful piece to be able to make your work move forward. There's a sense of belonging that's created with that people are working together to make sure we're being successful. And then that last piece, envision your future. There's a sense of hopefulness that's created there, that you can see the work that you're doing is making Sunnyside High School, whatever school you're is making it a better place. That the work that you're doing is having an impact. You can see that the future is becoming cliche-ish here, but becoming brighter because of the things that you're contributing to your school. So that's what we focus on as the culture of our building. Connect, build, and envision. You hear CBE. A little bit later, you're going to get a chance to see our ASB president is a writer for the Yakima Herald, and she wrote her version of our culture, and it's pretty cool to hear a student talk about it. So that's how we build our culture. With that, we were introduced last year to the CASTLE competencies and social emotional learning. When it came to us last year, it kind of felt like it came out of left field a little bit. I remember sitting in a meeting with admin, and for me, I always try to connect it back to things we're currently doing. I don't like just hearing a brand new thing and then, hey, let's go try this. If I can connect it. And so when I was listening to the CASTLE competencies on social emotional learning, I started thinking about if kids were lacking these skills, and you can see relationship skills, self-awareness, and social awareness, those skills are important in school and out of school, post-secondary, college, career, life ready. Those are things that you would want to be proficient at. And so I looked at the definition of those things, and then I thought about our culture. And then what I did is I thought if a kid was lacking the ability to build relationships, lacking the ability to be self-aware or social aware, then it'd be hard to connect to the culture. If you go to the next slide. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but and really what I'm trying to do with you here, and we did this with our staff a couple of weeks ago. I didn't want any action taking place. I just wanted them to see that if kids lack the ability to build relationships, or self-aware or social awareness, if they're lacking those skills, then it's going to be hard to connect to our culture of our building. And when we got done, we had staff talking about, we can see where it's an important piece to be aware of when I'm in my class, when I have my content to be, if kids are lacking relationship skills, it's gonna be hard for them to be focused on the content things I'm trying to teach. I'll be elementary. I imagine you're doing some really cool stuff around social emotional learning, maybe even middle school. High schools is a little more challenging. And so that's why we wanted to make sure it was connected to our culture. Our staff understand the importance and the principles of CBE. And then we wanted them to see that if kids are lacking the cell companies, there's 5. I just took 3 because I think sometimes you can get too much going out there. So again, I hope this makes sense. It's how we build our culture, and now we've tied in cell work into being a part of making sure that all kids can be a part of our culture of our school. And then this is that piece I was just talking about. Olivia Puente, she's our ASB president. She's an author for the Yakima Herald Unleashed, which is their student section. And Kefi's going to put the link in the chat. We're going to give you a few minutes to read it. And it's cool to hear a student talk about the high school and the culture piece. Because I think sometimes people don't understand, until you've been in our building, you don't really get a sense of it. And when you have your kids that can really articulate what it means to be a part of your culture, it's when you kind of got a good thing going. It's easy to lose, but when you get it, it's a powerful thing to have. So we're going to give you a few minutes just to click on that link and to get a chance to look at Olivia's words. I can't tell. Did the link go in there?
The link is in the chat.
Okay, sorry. I can barely chew and walk straight, so to be able to look at a chat, present.
I got you, Dave.
All right. Kefi, I'll let you tell me when to move on.
Sounds good. All right, Dave, it looks like we're getting some comments in the chat. They say, that's awesome. I love the line about teachers telling students to give themselves grace. Wonderful article celebrating the community in schools, no matter where you connect. I love the mariachi group singing to staff. All the feels. Wonderful. And it really is. Olivia's article is so inspiring. It's really great to hear from students that way.
Yeah, I wanted to put that in there. It was that article came out Sunday, and I was able to share it with the staff. And it's one of those times right now we're getting ready to end the trimester, and it's cool to hear a student be able to give the staff a pep talk. And that's really what it came to on Sunday this early week. Teachers emailing back saying, yeah, I needed to hear that this week. So again, that's the work when you put that into your culture of your building. The payoff is probably preaching the choir with you guys right now. That's such an important piece. It's easy to lose, but when you get it and the hard work you put into it is so worth it. Next slide. Again, it's just things that help with the building of your culture. It's staff and students being vested, contributing to solutions. What does that look like? That could be through PLC work. It could be students just coming up with ideas through student leadership, through clubs, saying, hey, can we try these things out? Again, going back to that, my school does that. My school does this. That's kind of your goal, what you want to hear staff and students saying. The part about building relationships, we use our assemblies. We do a thing called a holiday lunch, athletics, clubs, all the different ways that you build relationships in and outside the classroom. And then I put a thing on there called Grizzly Time we have. It's a period of time that's connected to the class before their lunch. And it's a place where staff and students can work on getting their grades up. When you get out of Grizzly Time, it's a C+ or better. And it's an incentive for doing things well. And it's a support when you need that extra support. And it's a chunk of time. It's not perfect, but again, it's a place where relationships get built. When I see that a staff member is giving me extra help to help me get my grades up, it helps to build that relationship. When I see a student as my teacher that's asking me for help to get my grades up, again, that relationship's being strengthened. And then the part about envisioning your future, that's that positive outlook. The prior experiences, we've been through this to get together. We've faced things worse. We've been drawing on this a lot when we've talked about the work that we're doing in online learning right now and virtual learning. And, you can draw on, that's because we've had worse than we've done. We've done this together, staff or students, so we can do this. And those are the pieces that go into building the culture at the high school level. Kim's going to talk a little bit about what she does at the elementary.
Need to unmute myself. Welcome. I'm really excited to be here today. I want to give a little background before I continue with the slides. I haven't had a chance to talk yet, but we've kind of followed the high school. Personally, I've had two of my own children go through the high school SHS there, and were present when Dr. Selena came and was the principal there, and the process that they've gone through over the last decade, I think, Dave, has been really a huge change process for that building and that staff and the students. And to be able to see it like in my own children as they have progressed, my older son and now my daughter who graduated 2019, and I have a freshman entering now. And me, I'm a little competitive, and I'm like, how can we capitalize on some of that? Because what I see and what I saw develop in the students of their pride in the school, and that this is my school, this is what we do, was really, it was a great experience for all the kids, and not being there to witness that with the staff, but then hearing staff talk about it was something I knew I wanted to try to create in my own building. We were identified for school improvement as well later on down the line. And we got the opportunity, which I really think as an opportunity, as very positive, to work with Dr. Selena as well. We've been working with him a little over 4 years. And the conceptual framework, absolutely, like Dave talked about, that is the foundation of our work here. But then and that informs your school culture, and creating that school culture through, like this slide says, the connecting, the building, and the envisioning. That's the backbone of how you create your school culture. And you know that you do a lot of things in your own buildings. And so this is something that at the elementary, I really struggled with. How do I create student leaders with first graders? My building is 1st through 5th, and so we've really tried some different things, and without creating that school culture and that sense of fitting in and everyone's self-worth, and that you belong to the school, whether you're an adult or a student, and you have pride, whether you're an adult or a student, of your school, that is what really then would drive your academic achievements. Because until you get that culture established and solid, the academic achievements we found weren't happening in our building. So, and I think the proof was in that our school has, like Dave's graduation rate at the high school has continued to rise and hold steady at a very high percentage. And here we've able to show growth in areas, and then the year after was growth in all areas as they measure from OSPI. Very disappointed we could not test this last year because of COVID, because we wanted 3 years in a row of being able to show rising scores and just be able to demonstrate that, yeah, what we've been doing and all this hard work is really paying off for us. So in elementary school, some of the things that we definitely are doing is in a virtual world, how are we going to do student of the month? How are we going to do our full school assemblies? We do Veterans Day well. We have lots of things that happen throughout the year. And so is that pivoting from a face-to-face school like we had last year to how can we make those things happen in a virtual world? I was telling Kefi and Dave that I already had my staff meeting this morning about our hybrid model starting next week on Thursday with kids in building. And then I rolled right into our student of the month for first, second, third graders and had like 300 people on that meeting into this meeting. So it's just a totally different way of doing that, but being able to connect our adults. And as adults, we think of also now our parents. How are we connecting our parents to our building as well? So they say that is our building and have that pride. We've already practiced and working on our Veterans Day assembly and just how can we keep everyone together and connected. So I think that's a lot of the things that we've been doing. The envisioning, the sense of hopefulness, and making sure that staff have the tools they need and feel appreciated. You know, people commented on the mariachi coming down the hallway at the high school singing. It's like, how are we honoring people still in a virtual world? So we've been very creative with staff meetings and staff lounges and different things that help support our staff, which are just as important as our students. I think that's it. So on our early warning systems, Dave and I are both going to share some of our dashboards that we did in the spring and how we've rolled in what we've learned and how we've rolled that into the fall.
Perfect. Yeah, I thought that was unique. You heard Kim talk about disappointing not being able to test. There's probably not a lot of schools that say, gosh, I wish we could have tested last year. But it's a way to measure. And I same thing would be to be able to measure the impact you're having is so important. And then I would agree with what Kim talked about, the importance of the assemblies. We've done 2 virtual PEP assemblies. We've done, our principal, Ryan Maxwell, has been great about, hey, what are ways that we can continue to do things virtually still to make sure that it feels there's a sense of normalcy happening. And so that's a big piece. And it's equally as important for your students and your staff. So one of the things before I move into this next part, so I previously had a position where I oversaw our science and our counseling. I've moved now into student life and athletics. So I can give you a little bit of what we did prior to, and I'll talk about what Ryan has been leading, been our principal since 11, 12, I believe, and the work that he's done to help our staff solve problems as we've moved into virtual learning this fall and into hybrid coming up here in December. James Wise, who's one of our assistant principals, that is, I saw a question earlier about, can we know about the systems or the dashboards? We use, and we'll get into this, we use Google and we use sheets and formulas. And James is the guy that you can say, hey, this is what we think we need. And he'll take our student information system and he'll use Google Sheets and he'll do a formula and pulls it out. So we'll get into that a little bit. It's going to look like, oh, how do you do all that? You really just want to start super simple and then move from there. Other assistant principal, Holly Oler, she oversees our advisory and has created ways to utilize advisory teachers in a way that they become an essential piece of our online virtual learning right now. Wally Shear, Gabe Darbison, and Bruce Davison, other assistant principals, they oversee different facets of our school, and they're able to get together now and say, hey, this is what we need to make sure we're measuring. So you're going to see a lot of the work that they've done and their thinking, and we keep it super simple because we know that our dashboards have to be simple to work. So that's a lot of preface before we get into this. So this is our pre-COVID, pre-March 13 dashboard. And you can see we utilized the sheets. And to get onto this dashboard when we were face-to-face, it was 3 or more Fs, got you on there. And then it was, we break it down by attendance and behavior. And we have attendance team, we have behaviorists, and then we have the counseling department. And so it was a way to chunk it to make sure that people were being able to support the people. And we had kind of a point person that was a communicator and a support. So that was we played with this again. James Wise is amazing, being able to take a visual and put it onto a sheet and be able to take our Power School student information system and use a formula to pull it out. So that's a pre. And then the next slide is during. So when we went after March 13th, we knew we needed to be able to still figure out which kids were not being successful and how to provide support. And really at that time, it was making sure we'd connected with everybody and that we had an adult checking in with them. And what we learned really quick, and I'll talk about what the different colors mean, we learned really quick that we had all these different people that were trying super hard to connect. And we had parents that were getting like 4 or 5 different calls sometimes. They're like, hey, I know my kid's failing. I just got 3 other calls. So then we had to figure out how to make sure that we weren't overwhelming parents by letting them know that their kids weren't being successful. That's where the color system came in. So we had EL, we had SPED, we had behavior. And so we utilized our resource a little difference with our paras and our support staff to make sure parents weren't being overburdened and overwhelmed with the calls they were getting. So that's what the color system's in there for. And again, that time it was really, we had to make sure they were safe. Did they have what they needed? Were they connected? So that was during the emergency learning. In the next slide, again, it talks about how to utilize that support team was used to working together. But again, when we at your homes trying to pull this off, it took all the gardeners. That's why our assistant principal, we call them gardeners. It took them coordinating together to make sure that's how the color system came to play. So we weren't overburdening parents and the system either. The next slide. This was a piece that we had prior to. Oops. There we go. And this is our online referral system. And this came about prior to, and it was a way for staff, if they saw social emotional things happening in the classroom, you saw a kid acting differently than they had in the past, it was a way for them to do a referral. We have 2 social workers in our counseling department. And then we've partnered with our comprehensive mental health to hire a full-time therapist on site too. But so our social workers would get the referral and then they would look at it, and there was things that social workers could handle. And then there was things they said, okay, this is the next level. We got to make sure our therapist gets in the loop. So this was the key prior to, but you can, as you guys know, after March 13th and the anxiety and the stress that happened with our staff and students, it was a key piece to have. And our therapist was super busy during the time after March 13th, just making sure kids were in a good spot and they had that support continuing to happen. And that continues. That's, again, a system that we continue to use today.
So this goes into our early warning system back in the spring and then how it morphed into the fall. This was ending the spring last year. Initially in March and first part of April, we really were focused, like I'm sure all of you were, can kids connect? Are they okay? Those were our main 2, where are they? How can we support them? So those were our main criteria for red, yellow, and green. Starting April 15th, we then merged into, are they participating? Are they engaging? Because we've worked on all the kids that are not able to connect. We've got them hotspots. We've made all of those. So this rolls into that April 15th-ish, about a month after we start in. to labeling our kids red, yellow, green based on are they engaging and doing the work. So this was our very keep it simple dashboard. We did identify our EL kids, and we did have another document that worked on our SPED kids, making sure they had what they needed. So it really, like Dave said, keeping it simple. Next slide. This is a fall example, and it does address here in October, it looks like the last 3 weeks here in October, math. Oh, excuse me, I think I'm the wrong slide. Sorry. This one addresses not math, but it's ELA and then math in tier 1, 2, and 3 supports. You heard Dave talk about his high school where kids had to have so many, they were a red and a yellow and a green. This was our supports divided up into special pops. Our EL only, our SPED only, then our kids that are both, and then our kids that weren't either. And we really wanted to dig deep into which kids are we not reaching and which kids are we reaching. Next slide, Kefi. This part of our dashboard pulls out data on our attendance. And I have a counselor we use Google Everything, and he does all of the sheets and the formulas. That is not my wheelhouse. So this screenshot is of a classroom just measuring their attendance for actually it's the whole grade level, 4th grade. On the left, it shows the overall percentages as we let the bar be at 75% as our yellow. We just established that, keeping that simple, and then higher than that was green. So the overall, we've gone from 77 to 90% average attendance since August of this start. This has all been virtual. We haven't been back in school yet. And on the right-hand side, and then it breaks down into each classroom teacher. And when you click on those numbers and teachers over there, you can get which kids are not attending. And we can then take our teacher and support teams and our counselors and work on those kids and make those phone calls. Next slide. So in the spring, our dashboard was not at all like the high schools because we hadn't integrated our academics. We had they were pretty independent. We had a attendance dashboard, we had a behavior dashboard, and we were really starting to work on academics. When COVID hit, it really created the situation where our grade levels collaborated in a way more intentional way. And we got to the point where they could identify what is the ELA target for 2nd grade this week? What is the math target for 2nd grade this week? And they were able to identify those. And then what does success look like? You know, if we're having exit tickets or exit or whatever the assessment might be, how will we know that they completed and reached that target and had success? So this dashboard, I can't tell exactly. I think it is from, yeah, this is our October. Here it's a 2nd grade teacher, it's just her classroom. We can pull this data down to the individual kid because these are all individual kids. And then we have the capacity to pull out her classroom attendance. The formulas on the right, you can tell they're not quite formulated. The 1 should be 100 and the formulas aren't quite exact, but this does give you an indicator of what it does look like for one classroom teacher. I think that's that on that one. We talked about support teams, and this was huge. How to create, and going back to CBE, how to connect everyone in the school. We really had like an all hands on deck when COVID hit. And we did have this system prior to COVID. So that was something that we had set up in our and that was a success for us because we already had teams of people that supported specific grade levels. So for example, they supported, and these were the tier supports that we already had in place. And so our work when COVID hit in the spring and now into the fall is how do we pivot on this and make sure we can keep these systems of support for attendance, behavior, academics, and social supports. How can we keep all of those going? What do we need to do? So we just really made sure that we took our systems that we had and could try to pivot on that. And like for example, the attendance. We have a huge amount of money going out weekly on mailings. We mail out tons of postcards and certificates, incentives. We tried to find really flat candy to mail to our elementary kids, Laffy Taffies, I think, and the post office still charges us $3.80 an envelope. So we wanted to create that system where the kids were wanting to engage and wanting to get that reward and incentives. And it was funny because a parent said on Facebook, it was something, she's like, yeah, my kid waits at the mailbox. They get this, they're always getting things. Another person from another school had said, we don't get that. And it was just like this kind of proud moment. Not that the other schools aren't doing that, but that the parents are excited and the kids are excited because that connects them to our school even greater. And that's it, Kefi.
So this was one of our, we call it a COVID hack. We learned about the autocrat system. This is an add-on through Google Sheets. And prior to COVID and the shutdown of March 13th, I hadn't heard of autocrat system through the Google Sheets. And this came out of necessity. We're figuring out a way to communicate to our seniors, the 450 of them, some that were done, some that had a little bit of work to do, and some that had a lot of work to do. And there was a couple of sleepless nights. Senior counselor was thinking out we were going to do a handwritten plan for every kid and mail it to them. We're fortunate enough we have one of our teachers is also our tech support person and is a Google certified. And so he knew right away of this autocrat system. And actually, James Wise, the person I talked about earlier, he's been using it too. If I had talked to them earlier, I would have had a couple more sleepful nights in the spring. Anyway, and what this does, it takes information off a spreadsheet, and you guys may already know about this, and they can put it into a document for you. And so what we were able to do is to take the information and send through an email to all the seniors. And then we also did it snail mail. And then for our kids that were, we have a color system, red, yellow, green, or kids that were red, we sent that certified mail to them. Those are the ones that had the classes they were in plus some makeup to do. So they got a certified letter. And it was just a pretty, after we looked at it, it was a pretty simple way to get the information out. So that was one of our COVID hacks. Counselors are utilizing it now for just another communication with their students and advisors and parents. So that was one of our bright things that came out of this that we may not have discovered had we not had a need to do that. And then again, just talking about the importance of being able to integrate your systems together when you have all three of those supporting the parents, the students, and the staff. Staff don't feel like they're walking on an island by themselves. They've got a support team that are helping them. And when teachers feel that, they're more likely to hang on to kids when they know they've got the support from a system-wide support.
I think this one is my slide, and this kind of has a little snippet of our COVID week or COVID time in the spring. it's to share with you, like when I talked about the all hands on deck, we divided up everybody. So I had the grade level teams down the center there. The paras went to teams. Our SPED has teams. For example, my first grade teachers have an interventionist assigned to them who's a certificated teacher. And they have 3 identified paraeducators. They also have 1 special ed teacher who serves that grade level. Secretary is assigned to that grade level and a counselor assigned. So not only, of course, the counselors serve other grade levels, but one of their primary roles might be first grade, for example. So that team and those like paras, that's their focus. And when they needed to contact families, I think you heard both of us say, parents did not want to receive 10 phone calls from 10 different people about the same thing. So we started, okay, we got to come up with a system and make sure that we communicate that. So we had a communication log. And on this little snippet, this screenshot, you can see little yellow indicators on those boxes, meaning there's a comment here. And it says, for example, Kim Frank contacted this parent on this day regarding this issue, action taken or something. So we're able to keep a track of, so we're not repeating ourselves, I guess, is the main purpose of that. And we all know how to support each teacher that way. So the teachers weren't having to make all those phone calls. They, of course, could make the phone calls, but they were able to access their document and see all the support they were getting from counselors, secretaries, SPED, paraeducators, administrators. The communication part, we have our school-wide data, we have our parents, and then I think it's just that important piece of making sure that we share not the leadership, but share the support for all of our teachers. So that's what this is indicated. And we did morph to a different document for the fall that's a little more comprehensive for the communication. But this was our keep it simple and just put something down so we don't duplicate the work.
And then this is the fall 2020 dashboard. Again, James is super great about taking the feedback from counseling and the attendance team, the behavior team. It could be the gardeners from different areas, and then being able to pull information out of our Power School information system and put it into a sheet. And that, again, it can look super overwhelming, but if you start simple and you're looking at what do we want to just make sure we know right now, and you can see on here, so the behavior team, the counseling team, and the attendance team, they've created now, we've got yellow, which is, you can imagine yellow is not quite on track, and then an R2 and an R1. Well, red is usually bad, but then you think about a kid that during this virtual time, they may be failing, but it's not like really bad fail. And then you've got some kids that, because of circumstances have not been able to engage at all. So you had this R2, and again, this is that team's thinking, and they were able to identify them. There's another sheet now that's available that you have every teacher, and you can click on that teacher. It's a drop-down menu, and you can see which of their kids are green, which ones are yellow, which are R1 and R2, and then staff are declaring, I've got these kids. Well, they're going to be fine. I've got a plan in place. And so as an admin team, you're able to see the big picture of your school by teacher. And it's not going to them and saying, hey, these are failing, what are you going to do about it? It's the admin team thinking about what are we going to do school-wide to support the teachers. So again, it's if you're looking at a dashboard for the first time, you could be thinking, wow, that's a lot to do there. I would start super simple and just figure out what you need to measure right now, and then go ahead and measure it. And that's a good place to start.
All right, everybody. I think we are going to go to breakout rooms next. And in our breakout rooms, our plan is that we would love for somebody in that room to take some notes, and for someone who wouldn't mind sharing out to be the reporter. And in your group, you can ask your team, what does our CBE look like? You can kind of choose your own adventure. You can talk about all the questions if you want to. How can we adjust our early warning systems? Or you can just talk about how you're feeling right now. Maybe you want to talk about some fires that are happening at school and get some support from people across the state. So we're going to put you in those groups now. I think we're going to go to them for about 10 minutes, and then we'll be back. And those rooms should be open. If you're having trouble, you can always come back to the main room. And is anybody out there needing help joining a room? Would like to join a room? Mm. We've got about 1 minute left as the breakout rooms close. All right, it looks like everybody is back from their breakout rooms, and we'd love to hear a little bit of the conversation. So let's do that. If you have any comments from your group, you can just raise your hand and we'll unmute. Or you can just unmute yourself and say something.
This is Dixie. I'm going to try to channel Kevin Foster in a little bit of the conversation we had. When we were leaving our room, he said, you know, when we first started looking at early warning systems, it was all about catching the kids that were falling through the cracks. And now really looking at early warning systems, green all the way through red on all kids really creates that systems view, and it helps staff connect to the overall systems, and they see the systems as supporting them and that they're part of something bigger. And it really gives that whole view. And I think the early warning systems that we saw today illustrate the power of an early warning system beyond responsive catching kids falling through the cracks. And I really like that. Kevin, I hope I didn't misspeak, but that really resonated for me.
Thanks, Dixie. Yeah, systems approach. Makes it all make sense.
And being the proactive versus the reactive and being prepared.
What else did we hear out in our groups? Let's take one more.
I think in our group, this is Lorenzo, Sunnyside. We spoke a little bit towards the end about the challenges that we're facing with our kiddos not linking up just for, you know, daily educational activities, and also that some of them don't want to have their video camera on. That is also one of our mechanisms to see visually our teachers, whether the students are getting it or not. So I think COVID has created a lot of challenge, but what we're hearing is, you know, some of the ways of tracking the progress that students are, you know, having and what have you, which is hard to kind of, you know, track that with COVID and not seeing our students face to face yet.
Thanks, Lorenzo. And thanks everybody for participating in the conversation out there. Those breakout rooms are a really great place just to talk about what's going on in your building and figuring out what's next. So we did have some questions from our audience, and we wanted to be able to check back in with those. And I'm gonna pull up that chat if I can find it on the screen. So one of the questions that we got early on was, what metrics do you use? How do you weigh them? And how have they changed since our data disappeared with students at home in minimal attendance, discipline, and grades?
Yeah, what I would say on that one is we've had, and you think about when you had kids in class and then now with online, and you've got some kids that came every day and not getting things done when they're in the classroom. And we have kids that have been there every day and not doing things. And so you have to think about the supports that you would give the kid if they were, the thing you would do with that kid in the building, how are you going to transfer that now to the online? And it would be checking in with that kid and the parent and being able to provide that. And then the matrix we've been using is, again, it's trying to, you can be there every day, but the engagement piece is the tough part. That's been a challenge since March 13th. It still is today. Staff have become so creative in ways that they're trying to get the kids engaged. Lorenzo talked about the camera piece, and they understand that. There's reasons why kiddos don't want their cameras on. And then there's a challenge for the staff, because staff are, how do they know if the camera's not on and they're not putting things in the chat that there's life out there other than that camera. So it's posed a lot of challenges, and it's made us become more creative.
Thanks, Dave. We got another question. We're interested in hearing what others are doing to build community between online learners, teachers, and in-person learners, teachers. We have K1 mostly in person. Everyone else is online. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So early on, again, this was getting a chance to work with our principal. We talked a lot about trying to do things as normal as possible, even though it was totally not normal. So last spring, we did an assembly. We did our ASB and our class elections. We did that through Google Forms. And actually the system we created in the spring is probably the system when we get face-to-face, we're going to continue to use. So we did all our elections last year. And then when we came into the fall, we were able to move forward. We've done events. We call them Friday Night Lights. It was a thing that started last spring for the last year's seniors. And we turned the lights on our football field and put music on for 21 minutes. And kids just cruising our parking lot. They can't get out. We did a senior sunset where the kids were parked 10 feet apart in their cars. Did music playing. And then we're going to do a drive-in movie this Friday night. We're going to show Hocus Pocus. We're donating the money to our VFW. And again, you just follow the guidelines of what you're allowed to do in your community and be creative. So those are things that we've done. And as I said earlier, our staff, when we do the videos, we do video morning announcements. We've been doing those since last spring. It's equally as important for the staff to feel that it's as normal as it can be. So those are some of the things that we played with. We took our activities calendar and we just kept doing them, whether we were, taking it and just trying to do it virtually. So it's helped us be very creative.
Something elementary wise that we have done when we transitioned to virtual, we started off this school year by everybody K5 having a morning meeting, all cell based. It's just a check-in. How are you doing? So any kid all of our kids were online, but it's just that check-in. Every kid had a 9 o'clock meeting across our entire town. So any kid at the daycare, any kid at grandma's house, everybody's online at 9. So next Thursday, when we bring our K5 kids back, we're doing a hybrid A/B schedule, and the kids that are at home are we're going to still try to keep that going and Zoom those kids in so we can keep that established relationship between the teacher and all of the kids in the class, whether they're sitting in front of them or the other half that are sitting at home. So we are, that's one attempt that we're going to try to do, and fingers crossed next Thursday, it will all work well.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Our last question was from Paul, and he said, can we please be clear about, with early warning, what are we trying to predict? Are we predicting high school F rates? Is that different from predicting attendance or on-time graduation?
For us, obviously, we're the graduation and kids getting the credits they need for that. And then I didn't even talk about this earlier. We continue, like our counseling department, we have 2 staff members that do post-secondary, and they've turned that into virtual. They were meeting on Google Meet to start with, and it moved to Zoom. They brought in college recruiters to those meets, and making sure our kids had a plan for after high school. So that's a big piece for us as a high school. I think what Dixie talked about earlier, being able to look at your data now, and you can get this holistic view of your whole school, your bright green kids, because our bright green kids right now, working with our exec council, they may be doing fine academically, but they're struggling with the social emotional piece. Sorry. And that's a big piece that you could, if you look just at grades, you might get a false picture of how these kids are doing. And that's a big piece out there. And I'm sure it's not unique to Sunnyside. It's probably the entire state and anybody that's doing online. If you're just looking at the academics, you can get a false sense of that those kids are fine, their grades are fine. So.
Yeah. Those are the questions that we've had so far in the chat. If you all have other questions that you want to talk about, we can come back to them. We're going to go to the next piece here. So for next steps, we know y'all are doing great out there. You're awesome. Keep the growth mindset and breathe, and got to take care of yourselves. So remember that. We do have an OSPI YouTube channel, so if you want to share this with other people, or if you're interested in revisiting the content, you can do that. It's live on YouTube right now, and it's going to be on the OSPI YouTube channel. So if you're interested in getting those videos, whenever we post one, you can subscribe if you click that little bell. So go for that. We're also going to share with you, we would love to know how this presentation was or was not helpful to you. So we are going to have a poll here for our evaluation, and it would be great if you take a minute to take a look at that poll. And we're going to stick around for a couple of minutes in case you have other questions. And if not, have a great day, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunnyside. Thank you, Kefi.
Great job, Kim, Dave.
Thanks, Lorenzo.
Have a good one.
Yep.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
The comments are nice. If you haven't seen the chat.
They're really nice.
Re-inspired.
I'm curious if when you get the feedback piece, if it's like, if I was watching, I don't know if I'd want to go in a breakout room and do it right now. But I'd be curious to see what are they finding helpful.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what I wonder what they said. Well,
Yeah.
we had a pretty good audience. There were about 75 people
Yeah.
on point. And Zach, if you can hear me, can you make me a co-host? Thank you. Are you guys curious what they said for evaluation?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll share it back with y'all.